Ceann Comhairle, and I welcome the opportunity to speak on the budget. And I suppose, you know, the budget has been brought in yesterday, and there are a number of issues that I want to address within the budget and within the framework, I suppose, of the budget speech. I'd like to talk about the social welfare, and there was an increase in the social welfare package. There are a number of issues within the Department of Social Welfare that I'd like to address, and that is the huge delays in processing applications. And you know, a lot of delays that are in other departments, you know, may be seen as a cost-effective measure to try and reduce the cost of the exposure of the Exchequer to different schemes. But by and large, all these schemes that are taking 14 or 16, 14, 12 and maybe more weeks to process, they are granted and they go right back to the very start of the application form. So there's no saving of any description in relation to it, and particularly, I suppose, the carers allowance. You know, people make decisions, family members make decisions, people make decisions to take on the caring of an elderly relative or a person, family member or sibling that may need full-time care and assistance, and they take on that. They have to give up their employment before they can apply for the application, and they wait in 14, 16 weeks to have a decision made, and that is not acceptable. It simply isn't acceptable in terms of processing these applications, and we have many more applications as well, taking disabilities and so forth, that are taking huge amount of time, some places 16 and 12 weeks. And then there comes the case where the application for, you know, and many people that are in this house, they fill many application forms in relation to the Department of Social Welfare, and they, you know, they gain a huge amount of experience as what's likely to go through the department's medical, and, you know, they can advise their constituents accordingly. And then for some reason that the applications are refused, and there is a review or asked for, and new evidence is sent in, that should be done fairly speedily. But then if they appeal the case, and you're talking about 12 months for the appeal of the case, and I had a very serious one recently where it went to oral hearing and where we kept at it, but it was nearly 2 years before that carers allowance was granted. And in, you know, first of all, they said that the carers allowance wasn't, that the caree, the person that providing the care, wasn't providing full-time care and assistance. Then when we got over that hurdle, they came back and they said that the person looking for the care didn't require care, and it was clearly illustrated within the documentation that was put in the first instance by the medical reports and by subsequent letters. It was clearly illustrated that it was, you know, that it was a bona fide, it was an absolutely above board case. But between every kind of between the start of the process, between the refusal, between the appeal, between the review, there was nearly almost 2 years before that was done, and the person that was providing the care had no option but to provide the care for their elderly, for their relative. But it is simply absolutely and completely unacceptable in relation to it. And I think, as well as that, on the carers benefit, you know, carers benefit is where people that come off of employment and they're given carers benefit for 2 years. I think there should be a look at that, because, you know, there's no question of doubt about it, but the carers allowance where they are paid, they are actually saving the state. Rather than costing the state, they're saving the state, because sometimes the person might have to go into full-time care and that will be paid at €1,000 a week or €900 a week for the institutional care, whereas it's only 200 or so euros per week for the carers benefit, and there is a saving there, and I think that needs to be looked at. And I think that anybody in the department will have to look at the seriousness of making sure that there is a speedy decision made in terms of applications that go in, and it simply isn't good enough. The other thing on the social welfare, I suppose, is the Farm Assist. This year, in relation to Farm Assist, they're looking at accounts for 2017. Everybody knows that farming had a very difficult period in 2018, but also the eligibility criteria in terms of people that are working in a partnership. We have a very challenging case at the moment that I am working with the department to try and resolve, but that there should be a recognition taken of where it is genuinely above board, but there's, you know, the partnership doesn't fall into any rules or regulations that are within the department. Insurance as well. We have raised insurance here. We had a motion in relation to insurance. We had Deputy Kelleher's bill last week in relation to insurance. Insurance is a crisis. It is at crisis point in terms of it, and we have, you know, the Business Insurance Reform Group, who I have met with on numerous occasions, mainly led, I suppose, by Michael Horgan in Newmarket and Declan Ryan from Kenmare. They have put huge efforts into it, and, you know, have valued or gathered businesses around the country to explain the difficulties that they're having in relation to insurances. And I suppose some of the small businesses, some of the hotels, some of the restaurants, some of the hospitality industry are telling us where there's only one underwriter at the moment, and that there's enormous, if not extortionate, premiums being applied for. And also on how the Book of Quantums is there, and how the determination is, you know, some people only find out that there's a claim against them when they go to get their insurance policy increased, that it's actually paid out, because the person that actually, as the old saying went, pays the piper, calls the tune. But in this instance, the insurance companies are settling with the people that are making a claim without ever referring back to the person who had the policy. And I think that there's a lot of work that needs to be done on that. There is some give, but I think that the government needs to show more sincerity in relation to tackling the insurance, and it's a massive, massive issue in relation to insurance and every aspect of life. And we have seen as of late, you know, voluntary organisations who are providing, you know, any of the charity walks or anything like that, that the insurance issue last year in relation to Christmas lights in one community, there are a massive amount of issues that are being cancelled because of insurance. And I think that we need to, as a government, as a Dáil, we need to be highlighting constantly in relation to insurance, and that affects every facet of society, right through from the car to the homeowner and to the communities and to the businesses as well. And it is a major issue. We've seen in 2000, I suppose, from this weekend, from the Storm Ophelia, which was on the 16th of October 2017, right through to almost the middle of August of 2018, we had such a variety of different challenges that faced the agricultural community. We had a very bad wet fall of a year, we had a very difficult spring, and we had a very difficult summer as well in many parts of the country. And it has shown us something, you know, farmers at the end of their tether have invested heavily, very heavily, particularly in the dairy industry over the last while, and they have, you know, farmers have been making decisions to build a business around agriculture, to provide the raw material which is driving the giants like Glanbia and Kerry Foods and all those, and the exports that we have, the massive exports we have, and the jobs that we have in rural communities. And it has to go back to the primary producer, which is the agriculture producer. But what we need to make sure is we need the advice we have, you know, the advice changes from the organisations providing advice to farmers, you know, that there was 4,000, that farmers could borrow 4,000 a cow to extend their herd. Now those figures, you know, we're talking about 2015 when the quotas went, we're now 2018. Yeah, I don't think that there is anybody that can stand over those figures at this point in time. It simply wasn't a sustainable figure to give, and many people that did take that figure are in serious difficulty today. And I think that we have to have one word, and that is sustainable agriculture, sustainable food production, sustainable agriculture. And whether that's in the West Coast or on the East Coast, it has to be sustainable. And many of the international shocks, I suppose, you know, if you look at we are a globalised agriculture industry. If there's a drought in the Ukraine, if there is a fodder shortage in the US, or if there's a bounty of a harvest in the US, that will all affect what the farmer in, whether it is in North Cork or whether it is in any other part of the country, are going to get. It is a global industry at this stage, but we have to make sure that the advice that's going to farmers, that it is a sustainable industry, that it is an industry that the family or that the person that is participating in farming, the man or the woman, can enjoy a reasonable return for their labour. They work extremely hard hours, and it is challenging because last year has shown the challenges that have been out there in relation to it, and there are many of the bills that have to be paid for keeping the agriculture industry going, and the profits will be well back in 2018. And what needs to be done is the advice has to come. Now the advice has changed again, and they're saying that, to get experience and the renting of land and all that kind of stuff. I think that we have to be very sure of our ground in terms of how we are going to our agriculture, and we see the massive crisis that's coming down in relation to Brexit and how that will all pan out, and that will have a detrimental effect on how we go forward. So I think agriculture needs to be looked at, and the one thing I would say to the Department of Agriculture is that every payment that's there, by and large farmers have committed on the day the payment is due. They have a commitment to the banks or to some borrowers or to their co-ops or their merchants in relation to it, and there should be no delays in it. There is anecdotal and evidence coming from farmers at the moment that there is a very small, minute piece of land that is overclaimed, that there's a bush growing out in it. I have heard all the stories in 0.01 of an acre, and if the farmer challenges that, it will hold up their payments. Well, it should hold up the payment for that amount, but it shouldn't hold up the bulk of the payment, and that they are being challenged to say, if you don't sign this document, you'll get no money. And I think that has to be looked at, because many people are coming back to me, and people that are the consultants, the agricultural consultants out there, be they the Teagasc or private consultants, I tell you, it's like that they have no there's no defence to be put in, because if they do, they will delay their payments, and farmers can't have that. So we have to be serious about it, and I do think that what we need to do is to make sure that we have an agricultural industry that's sustainable, because they are the backbone of our rural communities. And if I come on to our rural communities, there's a whole raft. We constantly talk about rural Ireland and about services and everything else. There's a huge cohort of people that want to live in rural communities, and we have a massive services there that have been built up over the years. We have massive services in relation to our education services, in relation to our national schools and our post-primary schools, and also the infrastructure that's there, I suppose, at a sporting level, at a community level, and the community spirit that's in rural Ireland. And we want to make sure that they are vibrant as we go forward. We have seen and debated it here in the Dáil in relation to planning permission and to ensure that planning is available. I would have to say, we had a very serious meeting this afternoon with the members of our own party in relation to a huge turnout in relation to how we go forward in relation to planning permission. And it is one of the issues. If we don't give planning to young couples in rural communities, we can have all the other issues. We will be devoid of people. We won't have young people in schools. We won't have young people living in rural communities. And we have to decide whether we are going to have Ireland on the East Coast or Ireland right across the country, and planning permission is hugely important in relation to how that is done. And heretofore we haven't done it. We have seen a massive growth in the East, and you could nearly draw a line right up the middle. You have the West Coast and you have the East Coast, and you have huge challenges in relation to it. And we have to make sure, we've seen the post offices, we've seen the shops, we've seen the businesses, but there's a huge amount of people that want to live in their communities, and that they have. And if we look at I think it was 2002, on Taoiseach were in before the Environment Committee, and they were talking about the nonsense of having once-off houses. And if you look at the plannings that were given over since then, those people are contributing enormously to their communities. Whether it is actively involved, or whether it is the basic family infrastructure or the social support that's out there between families when they're living right alongside their parents or their elderly parents, or maybe brothers and sisters who might need help. And I do think that we have to be very serious about it, because we have all kinds of experts telling us all kinds of stuff, but we have to have a social cohesion. And the rural fabric that we've had over the years did serve this country extremely well, and we do have to make sure that we keep it alive. There are a few other issues I want to talk on as my time is rapidly running out. On the disabilities, and over the last number of years, particularly in 2016, we were talking about respite care for people with disabilities. And a number of questions that I posed on the questions and promise legislation, and they were saying that 2017 would be better on it. Well, the respite care hasn't been available as it was flagged as it would be in 2017. And there is major issues there. We have people that were being promised home care packages or shared care packages in 2015 and 16 and saying that they'd come on next year. And then when they go to the HSE, the service providers go to the HSE, there is no money available for it. The disability sector is under massive pressure. Huge, massive pressure. And if you look at the waiting list they have for young people in particular to get assessments and to get therapies, it's non-existent in some parts of it. And we see the service providers. We saw, the St. Joseph's Foundation I raised here last week on the order of business and what they have to do to try and balance their books. And going back to insurance, they have only one underwriter now that's in this country that is underwriting the insurance industry for the disability sector. They are Section 39 organisations, Minister, and those organisations are providing the state services. They are providing services that would not be there, that the state would be obliged to provide, but they are providing it for them. And through the foresight of Dr. Martin O'Donnell and others, way back 50 years ago, these organisations were formed to provide care in the communities for people with disabilities. And massive credit due to the voluntary organisations that were set up under Section 39 organisations. And it isn't good enough for the Taoiseach to at last Wednesday morning to say, well, the block grant has been increased by 28% in relation to these, the Section 39 organisations, when he knows in his heart and soul that there is a huge amount of extra services needed. Take St. Joseph's Foundation, they had an insurance bill of 140,000 odd. They have now a bill of 560,000 plus for their insurance, because there's only one underwriter in the state that's providing the insurance for those organisations. And they are hugely challenged to try and provide the best resources. They are challenged because of increments, and they're challenged because of transport costs and everything else. But we do have to make sure that it is not good enough to say, well, they're private organisations, because they're Section 39 organisations. They are providing the state services. It is true that vehicle that has been, that many around the country that were set up 50 years ago, that the state is providing the services. And it is not good enough or not acceptable to government ministers or the Taoiseach to say, well, they're private organisations, how they manage their money is different, because they need the same level of funding. And going back to the insurance, there is no doubt in my mind that the state claims agency should be supporting them. The only way to make sure that there's a proper balanced for them not to be extortionate insurance premiums is the state claims agency to do it. And I think that's something that should be looked at. We have other issues, broadband, about the viability of rural towns and villages. We've seen many schemes, that have been announced by the government in relation to housing and, the repair and lease and, the village enhancement, the houses within villages. They are not working. They simply are not working. They are not delivering to make sure that towns within villages and towns that could be brought back to life are not being brought back to life. On the minute or two that's left to me, on medical cards and on, first of all, on the home health services, and we've seen issues there, or statements by various departments that there was going to be an increase in home health hours. The home health hours and what they are trying to do in relation to roster people into shift work from 8 to 2 and from 2 to 8 in the evening, and changing the rosters that people have been working at in relation to the home health services. And I speak from deadly personal experience. The home health service is one of the best services that are in this country, and it is adding enormously to the quality of life of our elderly people. And there's a change now, and right back since the home health services came in the late 90s, and right back there's been many attempts to change it and to challenge it, and that it's not good enough and everything else. But it has been proven year after year to be an absolutely excellent service. And to think or imagine that they're now changing the contracts, and that there's a major issue coming down the tracks in relation to that. Also, people that are diagnosed with cancer. And I think that, if somebody has a diagnosis of cancer, and that is going to challenge them financially for the next, whatever level of cancer it is, that they need to make sure that they are given a medical card for 6 months. There should be a 6 month automatic entitlement to a medical card, and, because like the what they have to go through to fill forms and to challenge what they're doing to try and make sure that they, by the time they have chemo started or radium treatment started, and they are worn out from it. I mean, I have had many patients worn out from it in relation to how to try and get the medical card. But I think the solution, Minister, is that if there was medical cards granted to patients who had cancer for a 6-month period, and please God that they come through the treatment, but to make sure that they have time and that they're given the support through the medical card system. Again, Count Corla, I'm just only starting in my notes in relation to it. There's so many more issues that we'd like to deal with, but I bear your indulgence. Good morning.
Thank you, Deputy.